The most anticipated debut on this card, UFC London, we have the man himself, 23-0 as an amateur. Two-time IMMAF world champion. He's a European champion in amateur mixed martial arts. He is undefeated as a pro with a no contest where he threw a tough kick to the cup that sent a man screaming in pain. It is the Punisher, Muhammad Mokaev. And listen, like the Lion over with Brave CF, I can't do an intro that good. That's why they pay him the big bucks to do it. But when it comes to Mokaev, this is a guy that we've known of since he's an amateur, and you can't say that all that often. The fans out there, you might know an amateur locally that you're really looking forward to them becoming a pro. It's the best part of going and supporting your local shows. It really is, and I absolutely love it. But for Mokaev, he's been on a giant stage since he's become an amateur at 15 years old. That's the craziest part. He's 21 and 7 months right now. He became an amateur at 17, and he's had one of the wildest journeys to just not only martial arts, but to just everything. To get here, it's absolutely wild. He left Dagestan as a refugee at a young age. I mean, it was back in 2012. His mother passed away, unfortunately. His father took the trek from Dagestan up to England. He was originally out of Liverpool. He started training at Team Calbon. Again, became an amateur. He was the 2014-2015 British Junior Wrestling Champion. Took that fight, moved over to Wigan. You know, Wigan, they have a soccer team. I know that. But when I look at it for Mokaev, again, it's just crazy to see what he's become and how he's been able to round out his skill set. Now, I know that he's going to be billed out of KHK MMA, out of the Kingdom of Bahrain, and obviously you've seen the connection with Brave, but the impressive things that you've seen out of Mokaev and the fact that he's one of those fighters where he has so much experience as an amateur to translate it into a pro. He's a guy that looks like a finished product very early on in his MMA career. The one thing that you worry about, does he become an Eric Silva? Does he become an Eric Koch? We don't know that yet, but I absolutely love what I've seen, and it was some of the most fun tape study to do looking at his career.
Do you know what comp I'm going to bring up, though, as a potential worrisome, wow, really flashy talent? Could be a Mark Casey. Now, they don't fight in the same way, but anytime you do have someone who's known for some of those wild techniques who can get a really flashy fitness, you do worry that just sort of the traditional basics are going to be their downfall eventually. Now, with Cody Durden, it's going to be really interesting because he's had a mixed run in the UFC up until this point, so you don't even have, not that you don't have the best say on him, but you're going to learn a lot about Durden in this fight too, and for Mokaev, you really hit it on the head. He's not just well-developed for being young in his MMA career, he's only 21. Like, he's young in his career. Like, we were talking earlier about the Cory McKenna fight and how, hey, she's really young and she can improve a lot in a year and a half, 2 years. Mokaev's a more refined talent than she is, by far, if we're being honest, and he's still younger than she is. Like, this is really one of those cases where you have a prospect coming in who already looks this eye-catching and this good, and they can still improve quite a bit. But with Mokaev, you mentioned a little bit before we started filming, so I don't want to completely take your point.
Please don't.
He's very good on the in-betweens, though, and I will let you get more to that.
When you look at it for Mokaev, he can strike. It definitely isn't the best part of his game. It's good, but it's not the best part. He tends to take a little bit of time off when he's judging distance at the start of a fight, which, again, you're cerebral. You're well-conditioned. That looks great. I love to see a prospect
normally young
that.
Fighters are far more over-aggressive than anything, so I think that's a great point.
That much is true. I mean, we even saw that. Terrence McKinney, you got to blow your load early when you're taking on a guy like Drew Dober. We saw that last weekend. Almost finished him a couple of times. But for Mokaev, takes his time, really gauges things, throws a lot of kicks out there. He's a little lazy on some of his leg kicks from distance, but by and large, he has a great game that way. His boxing, definitely probably the weaker area of his game, although it still is very good. But when he does engage in some of the striking, he leaves himself out there, head a little high. He can get hit. But when he brings in his wrestling, the guy is relentless. And on some of those in-betweens, I mean, you go back and you look at some of the fights, but the two fights that really stand out to me for Mokaev, obviously Yamaguchi, when he's fighting as an amateur, he beat him 3 different times, twice, 4 titles. But the two fights that I really do like, the Glenn McVeigh fight when he became a pro, he wins that one by decision, but on those in-betweens, bop, he's landing a good shot up top, or he's landing that left high kick. That is really good. And against Abdul Hussein, who is a guy that I've talked about on this channel, you might have seen it in some of those in-betweens of the channel, some of those content pieces, but Abdul Hussein, 2016 IMMAF world champion, coming out of Finland. He is still an impressive talent that you have to watch, very, very well-rounded. In the in-betweens, Mokaev's got him up against the fence, breaks, And as he breaks, spins, and lands the left head kick, no guard there from Hussein. Like, it's amazing to see that one. The Ibrahim Navruzov fight is the one where he kicks him straight in the cup early on in the fight. Navruzov...
I immediately thought of John Dodson, because for some reason John Dodson's been kicked in the cup more than any other UFC fighter, I think. Weird nugget that I thought of when I was watching that.
But it was kind of crazy to see that. But again, when I go back and I look at this fight, it takes two to tango, and you want to talk a lot about Mokaev, and he is a very fun prospect to watch. For Cody Durden coming into the UFC, I didn't anticipate big things. He had one event where he fought in kickboxing, boxing, and MMA in the same night, which is impressive, but...
Is that known as a Bob Sapp?
I guess, yeah. I mean, or yeah, like a Mayhem Miller. Like, it's cool. It's cool when you do entrances like that. It's cool when Bob Sapp does wild stuff. But for Cody Durden in the UFC, he's not expected to do much against Chris Gutierrez in his debut up a weight class. And then he 10-8s him in the first round and gets beat in the second rounds, and it ends up as a draw. So his next time out, he fights Jimmy Flick, and he still wants that fight, even though Flick retired.
That was beautiful.
And he gets beat up and submitted fairly quickly. Then he fights Archie Long, and it's a close fight. Like, it really is. Durden wins the fight, but it's a close fight, and then he wants more out of it. But now he draws a prospect. It is an odd one for Cody Durden because his wrestling is there, and he's one of those guys that's just going to go takedown, takedown, takedown. When it's it's on the feet, it's a lot of 50-50, a lot of swinging with power. But Durden, to me, I have to say this and give him his due, I think he's a lot better fighter than the guy that I thought was coming into the UFC. And hopefully that's
very
enough.
fair. I really do think that's fair, because with Durden, you're right. He has good wrestling, but it's going to be really interesting to see if he can get his wrestling off early, and I'll be curious to see who decides to shoot for a takedown first, because I don't think either guy is going to be able to win a lot of fights at the UFC level just with their stand-up going out there winning rounds and moments, so they're going to need the wrestling at some point. I'm just curious to see who feels more comfortable with their stand-up, because if Mokaev's feeling himself on the feet, I could worry a little bit, if I'm being honest. If he does get a little wild, if he does start to tire as this fight goes on, Cody Durden is quite relentless. I know he had a good first round against Gutierrez, and then he got tired as that went on, but that was a case where he thought he was going to get a finish early, so you can kind of forgive him a little bit for not having the greatest gas tank as that went late. But I do like Mokaev, and like you said on the in-betweens, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, I think there's going to be a lot of that range in this fight. I don't think these guys are going to be in open space very long. I know I said I'm curious to see who feels more comfortable on the feet, but I don't think either guy's going to be over comfortable on the feet, and I do think Mokaev is going to be able to make Durden pay, maybe not with massive shots in the clinch, but those things do add up, those rabbit punches. I always go back to when Ben Askren fought Damian Maia, and Ben Askren doesn't have good stand-up at all. Damian Maia looked really good on the feet against him. But Ben Askren, just by walking forward through all these little like rabbit punches that had accumulation on Damian Maia's face, I think Mokaev could have a similar type of game plan to where it's all the little things that really add up over time, and I think that's why I'll be able to get the win.
For Durden, two-time high school state champ in wrestling, he went 121 and 31 overall, and again, I look at him, you look at the fight that he had his last time out, 30-27, 29-28, 29-28, but again, some very long entries. Mokaev will actually do that as well. Just shoot right across the cage and go for it. Works sometimes, and when it doesn't work, it can be really bad, but both of those guys tend to have that, so I can see Mokaev getting out of some of those bad positions and defending some of those takedowns from Durden. I'm going to look at the Topology votes first, because I anticipate over 90% of the fans are going to go with Mokaev, and we have a look there. Oh, it's very close. 527 total votes, 88% Mokaev, 24% by decision, 62% by submission. For the 12% that have Durden, 77% by decision. We look at the odds. Mokaev opened a minus 180 favorite. He's minus 338. Again, best fight odds. It's an average. And for Durden, he opened a plus 155. He is a plus 257. So, again, we set it up for both of these guys. I think Durden has an all-right shot in this fight. It's just going to depend on how his gas tank holds up against Mokaev. I think Durden, he's really, really odd with the way that he throws his punches and his shots because he comes in with a lot of power. I do think Mokaev is going to have some of those defensive. He is very, very speedy getting out of the way. He's very good at defending kicks, which is a big part of Durden's game, actually. Might come as a surprise to some people, but Mokaev is good at jumping back out of the way. He doesn't really check them all that well, but he has the movement to defend. So I do like Mokaev in this fight. I'm really looking forward to this one.
I think if Mokaev's on his back, it's not a life or death situation. He can work out of that position and then even end up on top or get up to his feet. If Cody Durden's on his back, though, I do worry about his ability to then get back up to his feet and to really be able to outwork some of those positions. So that's why I like Mokaev in this. And here's the thing, too. For a prospect being this refined at 21 years old, we might have a very promising promising young prospect on our hands.
Oh, there will be Khabib Nurmagomedov comparisons. That much is true. I am really eager to see this fight. Both of us going with Muhammad Mokaev in this one, the Punisher, to get the win. You let us know down below. Are we wrong? Do you have George's Cody Durden? Let us know. Dan from Best Fight Picks might. We'll see what happens there. But a big time slate of fights coming up in Volkov, taking on Tom Aspinall in the main event. You're not going to want to miss it. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.